Hey now folks, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to take a look at a game called 1750 Britain vs. France. It's from designer Jason Huffman and his company, Battle Hardened Games. This game is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter, so if you're interested in what you see here, or if you just want to know more, you can go ahead and click on the link down at the bottom of your screen or down in the comments section. That will take you to the official Kickstarter page. Now this is a strategic two-player game that details the very brutal wars that took place between France and Britain during the 18th century as they fought over various colonies around the world, such as in the North Americas, in India, and Africa, and so on. So one player takes control of Britain, one player takes control of France, and the goal is to have the most colonies by the end of the game. You're actually going to play the game by using a dice and card system. So while it might sound like it's a war game, in actuality, instead of like large sprawling maps with a lot of chits and a lot of different things to keep track of, instead you're using cards and dice, and all of the cards feature rich historical artwork, which actually makes it feel like you're playing through a history book. So, is this game right for you? Let's go ahead and do a brief overview of just how the game is played from turn to turn. Then we're going to come back. I'll tell you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of 1750 Britain vs. France. If you're interested in the Kickstarter campaign, you can follow the link at the bottom of the screen or down in the comments section. And please note that these are just prototype components of the game, so the final version of the game is going to look much slicker and more produced. This is just to give you a general sense of what the initial layout of the game is going to be. Then I'm going to take you through some of the turn order and turn structure of how the game plays while flashing some artwork from the final produced version of the game. So this is a general setup. On one side of the table you'll have Britain, on the other side you'll have France. Britain and France are going to have their own different battle decks and starting cards, and they're also going to have little tokens that indicate dominance on the respective colonies that you're vying for control of. There's also gold that you will earn during the game. Most of the some of the action in the game is going to take place with dice, and these are the different colonies that you have on the board. So you have North America, India, Africa, and the Caribbean, and depending on whether you're playing with advanced rules or not, you may have more than 3 colonies at each different part of the world that you're vying for dominance of. Not shown are different political objectives that you may have, and historical event cards that you're going to be drawing each turn, which will affect the game. So let's go through the different turn structures of the game. Now, the goal of 1750 is to have the most colonies at the end of 5 rounds. It's for a total of 10 turns. Each player is going to have 5 turns total going back and forth. On your turn, you're going to take 8 different steps in order each time. The first one you're going to do is drawing a historical event card. So these are just some prototype mock-ups of the historical events. I'll flash some other ones on the screen. When you draw a historical event card, you're going to resolve whatever the effect is and then move on. It may give you resources, it may give you gold, it may have some random effect on the course of the game. The next step on your turn are taking the actions of leaders and colonies. So some of the colonies that you have dominance over are going to give you special actions, and some of the leaders that you have control of will also give you actions as well. This is the step in the turn in which you'll resolve those. Now, once per turn, during step 3 of your turn, you're going to have the opportunity, and only one opportunity, in order to get a political objective. That's not pictured here, it's going to be off to the side on its own mat, but you're going to roll a die with any modifiers that you can possibly get in order to get one of those political objectives. In step 4, you're going to be able to make purchases with the goal that you have. There's 2 types of purchases that you can make. You can buy cards from your battle deck and put them onto your player mat, which is also not pictured here. You'll buy the cards, put them down, and then that's going to give you some sort of bonus depending on the type of card. You can also choose to purchase cards from the historical event deck. You don't show them to your opponent, you'll keep them and use them whenever you want to. Step 5 of your turn is movement. So if you have units that can go between the different colonies, this is the time when you can move them in order to try and gain control of those colonies during the next step, which is the battle phase. Different types of units have different types of rules as far as how they can move, whether they can have to stay in place in a certain spot, and what types of special effects they'll have on the colonies that they go to. Step 6 is the battle phase, where you're actually going to engage in combat with your opponent over the different colonies that are out. You'll add up the number of units that you have on each side. Those, depending on how many units you have, that's how many dice you're going to get a chance to roll. You may also add any modifiers that the particular unit or the colony is going to give you, and then you're going to roll off. Whoever has the higher total is going to win the combat. You only fight one battle, so if the battle is not resolved and dominance is not asserted after that point, then you're just going to move on to the next step and you'll complete the turn. If, however, one side was able to clearly win the battle, then in that case, that side is going to be able to put their dominance marker onto that colony. Now they have control of it. They're also going to be able to take the appropriate export that place gives them and put it on their side as well. Step 7 is when you can place cards that you've purchased before onto the different colonies that you control, or the high seas, if it's a card capable of being put out there. And the final step is collecting revenue, where you're going to be able to get gold from the bank. You always get 3 gold per turn, but you also get additional gold depending on if you have different exports from the colonies that you control. For every 3 different exports that you have, you're going to gain an additional gold. Now that's just a very brief rundown of what goes on in 1750. You can go to their official Kickstarter page for more information and also download the rules. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Well, that's 1750 Britain versus France, and I always start my final thoughts by talking about the theme and the components of the game in question. And for 1750, those two things are really interwoven. You have this theme of battling for supremacy between these world powers over these different colonies and this really brutal time in Earth's history, while at the same time you have this very beautiful artwork that's really bringing that theme out into life. I don't always like when games use stock historical artwork for what they're trying to do, but in this case it really works together, and especially together with the very well done graphic design of bringing this artwork out into life and marrying it back together with the theme. And that's why I said in my intro it feels like you're playing through a history lesson or going through a school book playing through this. But at the same time, this is not just an educational game that should be dismissed as being simple. This is actually a rather heavy strategic game, but not too heavy. I think that anyone could really get into this, especially though if they're into that theme. But even if you're not a big fan of the theme, or maybe you have never really paid much attention to this era of history, you still might want to try this game because of the complexity of it and because of the kind of game that it is, that sort of fits very neatly between a shorter kind of brief 2-player head-to-head game or a much longer, more grandiose game like so many different war games that might have the same theme. I actually haven't seen this theme too much in more standard, hour to 2 hour long board and card games that I'm used to playing. So it's a nice refreshing change of pace to see it being displayed in this way. I actually compare this game very favorably to Twilight Struggle. If you never played Twilight Struggle, if you've never heard of it, it's a very popular game that's a different era in history and different world powers. It's the US versus Russia during the Cold War, and it's much more of a bigger, grandiose board game. But 1750 has some aspects that are very similar to that, in the sense of the playing event cards that have a historical basis that will influence the game as you have to play strategically. You're going for area control of all of these different parts of the world and trying to have supremacy over them in order to have the most and win at the end of the game. But the thing about 1750 is, like I said, it's not quite as grandiose, but that's to its benefit because it's faster, it's easier to set up, there's not as much of a takedown time, and it's a card and dice game, but don't let the dice part put you off either if you're someone that doesn't like randomness in your games, because while the dice does add some randomness, because in war there's always going to be chance, at the same time you can mitigate that by spending money, or again by using your cards and your units' assets in a good and strategic way. So there's all kinds of different things you can do to mitigate that chance and still have that complex strategic head-to-head, trying to get into the mind of your opponent and outwit them, something that it also has in common with Twilight Struggle. So I think that the game is in good company in that regard, but really stands on its own. So, like I said, if you like the history and the era that this game is set, if you like deep, heavy, complex, but still very easy to get into strategic 2-player games, or even if you like either of those things on their own, I think that this is something you should pay attention to for sure, and it's a game that you might want to check out. And if you like both of those things, you should definitely check out the game, because they've done a good job of marrying that theme to the mechanics and having them sort of work off of each other to present a pretty unique experience that I haven't seen in a lot of other games. And if you are interested in the game, you can go ahead and go to their Kickstarter page. I'm going to have a link at the bottom of the screen and also down in the comments. They're currently seeking funding on Kickstarter, so do check them out if you're interested. That's 1750 Britain versus France from designer Jason Huffman and his company Battle Hardened Games. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.